All right, welcome back to the Unbearables podcast. I'm Brandon Ruiz, and I'm here with
Jack Cowart.
And today we're going to be talking about the Bucks and the Chiefs, the Super Bowl game. That's what we're going to start off with. We're going to then get into the Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier fight, and we're going to get into the Bulls-Clippers game. And we're going to also talk about who we think the top 15 quarterbacks are in the league. But first, we're going to start off with the Bucks and the Chiefs.
The big game, man.
You're telling me.
So I'm curious to know what's your big takeaway from the Super Bowl?
You know, I was shocked that I saw a lot of people criticizing Patrick Mahomes initially. I didn't, especially on. I watched Undisputed because I just wanted to see what Shannon Sharp and Skip Bayless were going to say about Tom Brady. Because I know they have that whole rivalry between liking Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady, and so I was just interested in that. And I was surprised that Shannon Sharp actually put a lot of the blame on Patrick Mahomes. I really don't think it was his fault at all. I think he did basically everything he could have done. He did throw 2 picks. However, he was getting pressured so bad, you know? And at some point, you make some bad decisions when you're running for your life just trying to make plays. And one of them happened at the end of the game where he had to try something. And so, yeah, he threw a pick, but he had no other choice than to get the ball down the field, you know?
Yeah, that's sort of what I came away with too. I didn't think much of the game was on Patrick Mahomes because, like you said, he was getting pressured at a completely crazy rate. And I got into a discussion about this with one of my friends, and he was basically saying that Mahomes's sort of need to drop back instantly and just scramble on almost every play is at times his greatest strength and at other times his greatest weakness, because it allows him to do the crazy things he does. But also when you drop back so far the way he does, his offensive line now has to block a much wider radius than most offensive lines do.
Yeah.
And I struggle with where to place the blame, because he was down a couple offensive linemen in the Super Bowl, and I feel like he should have adjusted for that and maybe not made his line block as much as they did. But if he wasn't willing to trust his line to do that, what other choice did he have, you know?
I think that I understand what you're saying and what your friend was saying when he or she was making that judgment, but I don't know. I mean, looking at how the offensive line was playing, I think Patrick Mahomes for the most part was scrambling because he had to scramble. It seemed like the line kind of broke down in a lot of the plays, especially towards the end of the second half, and then on after that, they just broke down immediately. Like, he had pressure on him as soon as the ball touched his hands, it seemed like. And so you can't stand in the pocket if the pocket has already collapsed, you know? I think in the beginning of the game it wasn't as bad, but towards the middle to the end, it was over. He had to get out of there. And I could see what you're saying, but I feel like it wasn't a problem the whole season until, 2 of his linemen were out?
Right, yeah.
So I think to put that blame on him isn't really his fault. It's more of, circumstantial, you know. It was 2 players that got taken out because of the coronavirus, right?
I think one of them was, yeah.
One of them. So having that happen, you can't really account for that. So it's hard for me to put the blame on anybody, you know, when you think about it that way. But I think he did everything he could have done. I think he had to get out of there. And his team, at the end of the day, though, didn't help him, in my opinion. I mean, Tyreek Hill, I think it was the first quarter, he dropped what would have been a 31-yard touchdown pass, and it hit his hands. You know, it hit his hands. He should have caught it. And then at the end of the game, I don't remember the receiver's name, but another receiver dropped another touchdown pass. And I mean, obviously, that still doesn't cut down the lead that the Bucks had. But you know, we all know, if you score a touchdown early on in the game, it changes how the game is played. So to say that, well, that wouldn't have cut the lead enough to have them win the game. You don't know how the Bucks would have played from that point on, and that's kind of what I look at least. So it kind of sucks that Patrick Mahomes, I feel, at least in my opinion, didn't have the help he needed, and he had someone out. But it is part of the game. Injuries are part of the game. It's something that everyone has to deal with. And I know it's not really, I would say, an injury more than it is an illness. But it's part of the game. So it does suck, but I mean, it could have happened to Brady, and probably Brady would have lost then. You got to think about it that way too. I mean, if Brady lost a lineman or two, I mean, what's going to happen then? Unless they have really good backups.
I think it's true that Mahomes didn't get a lot of help because of circumstances that were out of his control. But I also think it's true that the Tampa Bay defense might have exposed sort of the game plan for how to beat Mahomes in the future. Because I remember you and I talked about this before the game. We said the Tampa Bay line has to get pressure on him. And even though obviously the line was hurt, future teams facing the Chiefs now, maybe we know that that's how you do it. Even if the line is at full strength, if you can force Mahomes to drop back every single play the way Tampa did, maybe not even every single play, but just at a high rate, he can make crazy throws. Even when he was 15 yards behind the line in the Super Bowl, he was still making mind-blowing plays.
Did you see that pass he made when he was falling to the ground, and it was one of his last passes of the game? Exactly, that was the pass I was talking about. Yeah, that was a touchdown pass. It bounced off the dude's helmet, I believe, at least.
I think it did. Yeah, there was a bullet throw from the right sideline, and it was straight to the end zone and just bounced off the receiver, and it made me so frustrated because he wasn't getting the help. But what I was trying to say was, if you can force him to do that often enough, he can't win every single time.
Yeah, and that is, I mean, pressure is a quarterback's worst nightmare. I mean, because you have less time to think. Essentially, you can't do your progressions the way you would like to. The way that they were designed to be read. You go from this to that to this to that, but if you can't even start looking at your first receiver, then how are you going to look at your second receiver, and how are you supposed to know exactly where everybody is now? And so it definitely hurt Mahomes, and at the end of the day, I do think getting the pressure on him will definitely help any team's chances of beating Patrick Mahomes. But I also think they were playing like cover 2 most of the game, having 2 people back and not letting anyone get past them. I think that definitely helped because they were getting pressure, and they were also, in a sense, ensuring that Patrick wasn't going to be able to throw one of those bombs that he always throws. Right. So game plan wise, it was good, but I will say it's a lot easier to fulfill your game plan when people that are playing are at a lower skill level than the people that would normally be playing.
Yeah. And also when, from the Tampa Bay defense's perspective, you can rely on Tom Brady on the other side of the ball.
Oh, yeah. Tom, he did everything he needed to in the beginning of the game. I mean, I was shocked at how fast Gronk was moving. I don't think I've seen him move that fast the whole season. Maybe he's starting to get his feet back under him. I don't know. But he was moving pretty well, at least in my opinion. And he got those 2 touchdown passes, and Leonard Fournette ran for a touchdown. I think it was a 20-yard or 17-yard run, something like that. I think it was 27-yard run. And yeah, I mean, their offense was clicking. They were executing. Yeah, Antonio Brown did too. And I just can't believe, realistically, seems insane. If there was a bet to say that the Chiefs wouldn't have scored a single touchdown, what do you think the odds were on that? You know what I mean? That's ridiculous. I can't believe that actually happened.
I am sure that existed somewhere, and I'm sure somebody made a lot of money on it.
Or everyone was way too afraid to take that bet. It's one or the other. They go, yeah, I don't know about this one. It seems kind of scary. It seems like that's not possible.
It's so crazy that if if I remember correctly, this Super Bowl, it was the first time the Chiefs, or more specifically Mahomes, have lost by more than 8 points since Mahomes took over.
Yeah.
The first time.
I think they said
this is his third year now?
Yeah. They said he hasn't lost like that since Texas Tech or something like that. So that's pretty insane. But, I don't think this scenario is exactly going to play out like this ever again for Patrick Mahomes. I mean, maybe it does, but this dude's too good. If he has if everyone's healthy, it's not even everyone has to be healthy. Okay, if his line is healthy, if he can get the time he needs, he's unstoppable. And that's undeniable. But you're right, and we did talk about this, So if you can pressure him, then, people become fallible. It is what it is. Even the greatest quarterbacks, even Tom Brady, if he gets pressured and he can't throw the ball the way he would like to, he can't read his progressions or go through his progressions the way he would like to, then yeah, he's gonna have struggles too. But the fact of the matter is, this game, the Bucs just played better. That's all that happened. And even outside, because we did talk, so the line did play poorly. We can both agree on that. However, It wasn't just the line's fault. I mean, the Chiefs' defense had so many holding calls, so many pass interference calls, and I know some of them. There was one that I thought shouldn't have been a pass interference or call because I think that it was an uncatchable ball, but at the end of the day, they still called it. But people are saying, well, he kind of stopped him before he could have got to the point where, so you don't know where he could have caught the ball.
I remember 2 of those. I remember 2 that should have been uncatchable. And the one that sticks out more in my memory was it was just at the end of the first half, and Tampa Bay got the ball back with a minute left. And I think
was it Mike Evans?
Mike Evans. It was Mike Evans deep down the left side.
Yeah.
And it was a pass interference, and I thought it should have been called uncatchable. But to your point, that's still on the defense for making those penalties.
Yes.
It's defense 101. You got to know when a penalty is acceptable, and when you give the ball back to Tom Brady with a minute left, you can't give him those free shots.
It's like giving it's the same thing as giving the ball back to Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, all those guys. They're gonna score. And maybe they don't score a touchdown, but they're definitely going to get some points. It's you're not going to get away with it.
That was when I knew the game was over. I knew the game was over when they got that third touchdown right before halftime.
Yeah.
Like, the momentum was just too much.
It just didn't seem... It was crazy, right? Because that was one of the first times I've watched a Super Bowl in a while where I felt like the game was over and there was still so much time left on the clock. It's weird because... This is what I will say. When you're watching a Super Bowl game, it's obviously supposed to be the best against the best, right? But the Chiefs were not playing their best. And the mistakes that they are making were not Super Bowl team mistakes, it is what it is. When you're dropping passes like that in the end zone, that's something that Bears wide receivers do, that's why the Bears aren't there. There's multiple reasons, but that's one reason where you need to make big-time plays, and the Chiefs players do make big-time plays generally. That night, however, they did not. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say they deserved to lose or anything like that. They deserved the L, but because I do think if the line was better, it would have been a way closer game, I don't know if the Chiefs would have won, because I think the Bucs still would have played really well and Tom Brady still would have played really well, because at the end of the day, that defense was basically the same. So Tom would have put up points and Patrick would have put up points, but Tom did put up 31. So you can't really... I know it's not just himself that put up the 31, but when you're the quarterback, you kind of...
But he's the quarterback,
You know what I mean? You kind of orchestrate what's going on. So... almost in all instances, unless you just get the ball and you hand it off and it's in like an 80-yard run off the bat, then yeah, you didn't do anything there. You just handed the ball off. But that was never the case in this game, So he did a good job.
I mean, yeah, he's the greatest of all time.
Yeah, you can't really say anything. And well, okay, one thing I do want to ask you though. I do agree, obviously. Do you believe that there's a chance that Patrick Mahomes could catch him? Because I do think Patrick Mahomes is the most talented quarterback to ever play football. You know, I think Aaron Rodgers is probably second, but what Patrick Mahomes can do, there's a lot of things that Aaron Rodgers, I feel like, could never do, you know, and that's my opinion. I think the difference is Aaron Rodgers at this age was not as accurate. First of all, he was not throwing this many touchdowns. It's not even close, you know. So I do believe Patrick Mahomes is at a level, and he probably hasn't even reached his prime yet, that probably has never been seen before. And
I agree 100%. I think you're right on the nose saying that Mahomes is probably the most talented quarterback to ever play the game. In terms of if he can catch up to Brady as the greatest quarterback of all time, I think that a lot of the discussion around that concept that's happened sort of takes for granted what Tom Brady did and is going to continue to do. Because with Tony Romo calling the Super Bowl, he talked a lot about, if the Chiefs win this game, then Patrick Mahomes still has a chance. And if the Buccaneers win this game, then Tom Brady's going to lock the door. And I think that was oversimplifying it. Because, for one thing, we don't know how long Patrick Mahomes' career is going to be, if the way he plays the game is sustainable or not. But also, 7 Super Bowls is almost Wayne Gretzky level greatness. And the fact that we just sort of take for granted, Patrick Mahomes is going to win many more of these Super Bowls. I don't know if we can really even realistically say that. Aaron Rodgers only has 1 Super Bowl.
Yeah, but I will say, even though Aaron Rodgers was one of the least sacked quarterbacks this year, I will say that when you look at Patrick Mahomes' team, though, he has the team to go back. So
he does. He does.
So that's the difference.
The Chiefs are the next big dynasty, assuming they can keep Tyreek Hill, Patrick Mahomes at the level they're playing.
And their defense generally isn't that bad. I think they're pretty good. I think that Tom Brady just is Tom Brady, and he got the best of them that night. And I think they made a bunch of stupid mistakes that they generally wouldn't make. But I think also you probably do make a little bit more mistakes when there's as many weapons as the Bucs have on. It just
right.
It's like the same. It's very similar to what other teams have to face when they face the Chiefs. Generally, they have so many weapons that you kind of don't know what to do. Everyone's open all the time, and it was an interesting matchup. I thought it would be more fun to watch, but it is what it is.
Yeah, it is sort of disappointing that it didn't turn into the shootout we kind of wanted it to be, but I thought it was still entertaining, just because even when the Chiefs were down so much, it still felt like there was a chance because it's still the Chiefs, and that's what they've been doing for the past few years.
I feel like it was entertaining also because I did think the game was over pretty early. However, there was still a little bit of hope in my mind where I thought, well, he is still Patrick Mahomes. He does still have Tyreek Hill. But at the end of the day, it didn't work out. But it was also entertaining outside of that perspective, from more of a historical perspective, where I'm probably never going to see what Tom Brady has done ever again. We could say Patrick Mahomes could do it, but that's just, 6 more Super Bowls. That's a lot. And
that's sort of like the tendency we have to hype up the new generation, but I don't think we can have that conversation until he gets 3 more Super Bowl wins.
One thing I do want to talk about, but not tonight, is one thing I really want to get into is because football is a very, very much a team sport. Basketball is also a team sport, but I think I don't know how to say it, but I guess kind of almost the Michael Jordan effect of rings, so I'm the greatest type of thing, which I do believe Michael Jordan is the greatest, but that's just my opinion. But what I will say is applying that same logic to football seems kind of kind of weird to me. You know what I mean? Because I do think rings matter, but to the same extent as they matter in judging how good a player is in football, that seems a little, it isn't fair. You know? I mean...
Oh, yeah. I agree with that.
And so, because what if Patrick Mahomes wins 4, right? Let's say he wins 4, but his team eventually got substantially worse. But he still won 4. But he was playing great. Say he ends up... let's just make a joke here. Like, I don't think it's going to happen. What if he throws 1,000 touchdown passes? You know what I mean? Over his career. Like 1,000. Right. And he has four Super Bowls. Are we going to say that Tom Brady is better than him? Or is it still the greatest? Probably. But it seems kind of weird though, right? Because, I don't know. I mean, I know people then will bring up Drew Brees and stuff like that, but Drew Brees is a little different because, I mean, when you look at the way Drew Brees played, it feels bad saying it, but there are a bunch of little short passes, and so people don't take his stats as seriously because they don't. I feel bad. I'm not saying that he obviously had an arm early in his career, but I feel like not being the biggest deep ball threat that Tom Brady was, that Peyton Manning was, it really does change how you're looked at because on any given moment, you could just drop a bomb,
Yeah, I myself am a longtime Breeze lover, so that that assessment does make me sad a little bit, but I understand it. And I think the big conversation and the way that most people split it up in their heads is there's talent, there's sort of goodness, and there's greatness. And I think most people at this point would agree that Tom Brady is probably not the most talented or the best quarterback to ever play the game, but his legacy is one of greatness. And I think people make that distinction. So if
he might be the
Patrick
smartest.
Mahomes did have, he might be. But if Patrick Mahomes did have that theoretical career, 1,000 touchdown passes, only 4 Super Bowl wins, I think the public consensus would be that he was the best quarterback, but not the greatest. And I think that's how most people tend to look at those things. But it's subjective. So
some people think that's stupid to say.
Some people might think differently.
And I think that's kind of weird to me because I understand, but what's the difference between the best and the greatest? It's okay. Well, if you really want to say that, because you could look at someone like Bill Russell. I mean, technically, he probably is the greatest, technically, right? If you really want to get into that, because he won so many championships. The argument against it would be the league wasn't I feel like fully established when he was playing. So that's what people will say, and so I think there were less teams when he was playing. I might be wrong, but that's what I think, at least, because I mean I don't have everything up in front of me right now. but and so that's the argument. They say, well, so you can't really count his championships the exact same way, right? But then we look at someone like Michael Jordan, 6, okay, and then what does LeBron have right now, 4?
I think so.
But so in terms of something like that, people are gonna say, well, Michael's still greater because he has 6. He's the greatest, and some people might believe that LeBron is the best player ever, but Michael's the greatest, or who knows? Or some people think LeBron is the best and the greatest, or Michael's the best and the greatest. All these different things. And so some people also think, well, how could you be the greatest and not the best? But I think that you're missing out on the fact of, okay, it's because it's what you accomplished was what makes you great. That's why people have a problem with Carmelo Anthony. Because Carmelo Anthony might end up being one of the top 10 scoring players of all time. He might be top 10 scoring of all time, which is great, right? But people don't really see that as a big accomplishment. But that means he was really, really, really good. One of the best in the league for a very long time.
For a long time.
But he never won a championship. He never won a finals. He never got to the finals. He never won one. And so people are going to say, well, he wasn't that great. And that's why I feel a lot of people will say that there's no such thing as the best and the greatest type of thing. But then they view Carmelo Anthony so poorly. And I think, well, why do you do that? He has all the stats. why is he viewed differently? And that's where I feel like the distinction is. But I feel like the people that think it's stupid would even agree that that comes into play when they are looking at players like that.
Yeah, I think what it comes down to is this might sound a little weird at first, but why do we watch sports? Why do we watch the teams we watch? Why do we like the players we like? And for me, the answer is I just want to be entertained. And whether or not Carmelo Anthony or theoretically Patrick Mahomes, if he doesn't win 7 more rings, whether or not a player has a ton of championships, I can still think they're a very good player because they entertain me and they put up the numbers and I had fun watching them. And there's so much in sports culture, this rings mentality, like you said. And I think it strays away from the point of we all sports fans, we all just want to be entertained.
Yeah, you could be great without winning rings. However, winning rings, like if your favorite team wins a championship, it makes you feel this this great feeling.
It makes you feel something different, man.
And so I understand why rings are weighted so heavily, because as a fan, when someone wins a championship, you feel incredible when your favorite team wins in a championship.
Do you remember in 2016 when the Cubs won?
Very
that
vividly.
Feeling?
Yeah.
Like, I'd been out of the baseball game for a little bit at that point, but I got back into it because it was the Cubs. And even though I wasn't a big baseball guy at that point, the feeling when they won that final World Series game was incredible.
Oh, it was great. I mean, I grew up watching baseball all the time with my dad growing up. I mean, he'd come home from work. We watched the Cubs together. I collected baseball cards, and I had my grandparents. They had these neighbors, and they didn't have kids, whatever. And so, but they were season ticket holders for the Cubs and the Sox, but they would take me to go to the Cubs games, the Sox games, and so I grew up a really big Cubs fan. I wasn't really a Sox fan. I was a Sox fan, actually, but not. Cubs are number one. Like, I would just go because I had a good time watching baseball, so I liked going to watch baseball. You know what I mean? So, I was born in Chicago, and I know it sounds weird because I was born in Chicago. Like, you gotta pick a side, but my dad was also a Cubs and Sox fan because he grew up going to watch both games, as did I. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where I was with that. But so when I saw the Cubs win the World Series, that roller coaster ride of a Game 7, that was a great feeling. And so I understand why chasing that greatness of winning a championship is so different, and that's why it's weighted so heavily, because it's the feeling you get when your favorite team wins, when your favorite player wins. Like if Derrick Rose won in the finals, I would have felt ecstatic. It would have been great. I would have always been like, well, you can't say anything about Derrick Rose because he won a championship, because that's how I would have felt if Derrick Rose won a championship. And I still feel that way because I do love Derrick, but it would have been extremely different if the Bulls won a championship, and there would have definitely been some attitude if anyone said anything about Derrick Rose. I'd be like, yeah, well, nah. He's a champion forever. That's what it would be like. And so if someone wins 7 times, that's why you watch, because you hope your team wins a championship. I mean, obviously you could be entertained without it, but you got to admit, every time your team gets bounced out every year, it doesn't happen every year always. I mean, we have seen some obviously championships, Blackhawks, Cubs, whatever, but every time it happens, you feel this. Well, that sucked, even though you probably had some highs and some lows during the season. You might have had more highs even, but if you don't make it to the end, you still don't feel the best. So winning that championship, it does feel great, and I do think that's why there's a difference between being great and being the best, So I don't know. Me and you are on the same page with this, but I know there's a lot of people that don't feel that way, because I know Stephen A. one time, he was making fun of Max Kellerman about saying that there's a difference between greatness and being the best. And he says, how can you be the greatest and not be the best, and vice versa or whatever. And I mean, Max Kellerman said, well, it's the tale. You know what I mean? Greatness is how the story unfolded, what you accomplished, this and that. And some people think that that's not, that doesn't matter, that's not a thing, but I don't know. I feel differently.
Yeah, I do too. And I think if we can move on to the next topic, I think that the greatness mentality is much more in sync with the best mentality in combat sports.
Yeah, I would say that. Because if you look at someone like Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier, I would say Dustin is the more complete fighter at this point in their careers. Definitely in this point in their careers. I think Dustin's more of in his prime right now. And Conor is past it, which is weird because I don't know if they're the same age, but they're pretty close in age. And for fighters, this is around the time that they're in their prime generally. But with Conor, he accomplished so much at a young age very quickly, and everyone had this mentality of him being one of the greatest fighters of all time. And now that's quickly changed, but he still has this allure to him because he's Conor McGregor and he's a knockout artist. It's because how he beats people. Despite whatever anyone says, everyone, when you watch combat sports, loves a knockout. As long as the person doesn't look like they died, you love a knockout. So that's the thing about Conor McGregor. The only reason why I said that is because one time I watched Manny Pacquiao and Marquez fight, and Marquez knocked him out so bad, slept him, and I was at my cousin's house, and we're all watching it. My whole family's there. We're watching it together. Back when the whole family could just gather and not feel weird,
Those days.
Yeah, those days. But that was so basically. Manny just ran into Marquez's punch, and he just went limp and just was on the ground for probably 5 minutes. And I remember the room was dead silent, and someone said, "Did he die? Did he die?" And
it can be pretty tough to watch when that happens.
Yeah, and his wife was crying and stuff like that. But outside of that, so that was the only time I seen a knockout where I thought this was not entertaining, But that doesn't happen all the time, obviously. He's fine, clearly. He's still boxing to this day. But Conor McGregor, he gives people this adrenaline when he fights because you think he can knock anybody out anytime, because as a boxer in the UFC, because he uses his hands a lot more than anything else, he's the best, especially in his division. No one's better than him. He utilizes his reach the best, and that's the thing. Even when he was fighting Dustin can't strike with his upper body as well as Conor can. He can't throw punches the same way Conor can. However, Dustin is a complete fighter, and he'll throw a mix of everything. He can wrestle. He'll kick at you. He'll definitely throw a lot of leg kicks and work you, and Conor knows that for sure. And he can punch as well. It's just not the same as Conor.
Yeah, so I was about to ask, given that assessment of Conor's talent, what did you think went wrong for him in the fight versus Dustin?
So, I watched a lot of UFC fights. I grew up being a big boxing fan, but now I still am, but I'm really into UFC as well. And so Conor, the problem was that he decided not to check any kicks. I think with Conor's stance, he has such a wide stance, so his leg is super exposed, and not everybody takes advantage of that, but Dustin definitely did. And Conor definitely should have checked those kicks, but I know what Conor was thinking. He was thinking, well, I could knock this guy out at any time, so as long as I knock him out, I could take some of this damage, but I know I'll be done with him. I'll finish him. And to me, that's a very flawed mindset. At least that's what I think he was going through his head, because why else wouldn't you check any of the kicks? This is something that all fighters do, or they should do at least, especially at Conor's level, when they're getting kicked, because you can't take too many kicks to the leg. And I think his problem was he didn't kick him back until it was too late too, so he didn't mix it up. So basically, Dustin knew that Conor's legs were wide open. That's why Dustin was not afraid to go in for a takedown. He knew Conor wasn't going to kick him, and that's a big thing of why you'd be afraid to go in for a takedown in MMA, is because you have to worry about a knee. You have to worry about someone kicking you while you're going down, and you might get slept, But with Conor, he wasn't doing that fight at all. So if you don't have to worry about that, there's literally nothing you have to worry about as a complete MMA fighter like Dustin. And so Conor's game plan was very flawed, and Dustin's was perfect, I would say. Even though there was times where Conor, I feel like, kind of dazed Dustin because he is very good at striking, But yeah, Conor was not ready for that though. He looked like he was in the best shape of his life physically, but his game plan was off.
I myself am a very novice viewer when it comes to combat sports. I don't have much of a history with it at all. I typically only watch sort of the big marquee fights that make headlines. And even to me, exactly what you said was perfectly clear to me in terms of Dustin's game plan and Conor's game plan, because I don't always know what I'm watching with combat sports, but I could see clear as day that Conor just did not care about his leg. And it was confusing to me, because I think if you're right about Conor's mentality in there, if he was just waiting for the knockout, I think that's a very dangerous mentality to have.
It is dangerous because I think he can do it, because he's the best, I would say, boxer in MMA, at least in his division. I think the boxing is different if you're looking at someone in the heavyweight division, because they fight. It's from division to division. It's almost as if they're fighting completely differently.
They are, yeah.
Heavyweights don't use the ground as much. Some of them do. Most of them don't. And so that's why I'm saying, at least for where Conor's at, just to put that into perspective. I do think he can do it, but that's dangerous. Why? You have to protect your legs, because one thing too, you generate power from your whole body when you're punching effectively. So you have to make sure your whole body is healthy, and when you're doing these things. And Conor, eventually his legs started buckling up, right? And he couldn't put weight on his leg. That's why he ended up losing, because now he's a stationary target, and Dustin realized that. And so I think apparently Dustin landed 21 leg kicks to Conor McGregor. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
And I read, and especially it was 2-round fight, right?
Either 2 or 3.
I believe it was a 2-round fight. I think it was 2. But in 2 rounds, that's a lot. I mean, in general, that's a lot. But I want to read you this thing that I read, because basically there's this doctor who is kind of explaining what happened to Conor, and I do want to explain just because I think it's interesting. There's a certain part of the leg that people, when they're fighting, they're targeting because they're trying to make your leg buckle up, because they're trying to hit a specific nerve, essentially. And so I'm going to read these quotes that this doctor said. So, a kick in this area is specifically targeting something we call the common fibular nerve. It's the nerve that supplies muscle control to a part of the lower leg, but also some of the sensation. And he says, pay attention to exactly where Poirier's leg is making contact with McGregor's. It's just below his knee. This is where these UFC fighters are trying to strike to have these effective calf kicks. So actually, I'm not going to read that. But basically, the nerve is super, this is me talking about this now, but basically where the nerve is located is super close to the skin. And so this makes it easier than most nerves to really, really affect your legs. And so that's what happened to Conor. That's why his legs started swelling so much, because his nerve was taking so much damage. Essentially, at least that's what the doctor was making it. That's what he said, this doctor. Obviously, he didn't actually get to look at him, but he is a doctor, and he goes over fight injuries and stuff like that. And so this is a problem. So that's why Conor lost. That's why you have to stop the calf kicks, because if you don't, your leg will go dead. It'll go numb. Not numb, but it will be dead. You can't move it. It'll buckle on you. You have to do something about that. You can't let that continue to happen.
Yeah, it was a clinical effort from Dustin, and I found it pretty entertaining.
Yeah. It was definitely entertaining, but not good for Conor. All right, well,
we'll see what the future holds.
All right. Well, do you want to talk about? Oh yeah, they will fight again, so we will see. One thing actually before we go, I want to not go, but I mean go into the next topic. I do want to say is Conor is supposed to be extremely great at jiu-jitsu, But we still haven't seen that. And I think for Conor to maintain his greatness, he has to lock into that. He has to use it, because people are just going to start taking advantage of his legs from this point on if he doesn't do something about this.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Do you want to get into the Bulls and the Clippers a little bit?
Let's talk some Bulls.
All right. Well, one thing I will say is I like how aggressive Kobe White has been recently. I know sometimes he has some problems. I mean, on offense. On defense, he's still a problem. There were so many problems in that game. I was watching them guard Kawhi Leonard, and I felt as if, why are you even trying if you're not going to try? These are my thoughts when I was watching.
I think that's a pretty accurate assessment. The Bulls versus Clippers game was not a fun one for Bulls fans to watch, and it sort of highlights the problems that I think the team still has and will continue to have. It's a consistency issue. With the team being so young and defense being such a difficult thing for many of them to do, we can't really rely on them to get things done consistently. And until that happens, I think the Bulls are just going to remain the way they've been the past few years of, they're this young team with potential. And this is our third, maybe fourth year of doing that. And it's getting kind of frustrating, but I do think things are still looking up.
I do think some things are looking up, but it is difficult to watch this team because, okay, so if you don't have the talent offensively to match up with other teams, you have to make up for it somewhere. You have to make up for it in rebounding, or you have to make up for it defensively. It has to be one of those areas, right? But I feel like the Bulls struggle so much in those areas where it can be frustrating to watch because you think, okay, but you have to make up for this in effort, this lack of skill. And I know that sounds mean to say, but I mean, they don't really have any all-star type talent besides Zach LaVine, so they have to play harder. You have to do the things that you don't want to do in order to make up for the difference. But I feel like the Bulls don't do that. And so for me, that's a problem. I like seeing that there is more talent than there was on the Bulls, like the Bulls roster now, than there was 2 years ago, I will say. But it's still frustrating to not see the effort there in some instances.
I try to be optimistic about it because with Wendell Carter Jr. missing the last month, and now Larry Markkinen set to miss 2 to 4 weeks, it's difficult to get time to gel if not everyone's playing together. So the Bulls just beat the Pacers earlier today, and Wendell Carter Jr. came back, and he had a good game. He only played 20 minutes, I think, but he almost put up a double-double. And that's what you want to see. You want to see consistency from these guys. And he, from what I saw, had the effort down low, which is where he was struggling earlier in the season. But if the rest of the team isn't going to put that effort in, the young guys specifically, then we're not going to be able to trust them to get wins.
Yeah. We need the consistent effort and that's key. I think that's a really good point that you made, because when you're watching the games, you could tell that at certain points of the game, the Bulls are competing with higher level teams, but as soon as they face adversity, I feel they just give up.
They do. They do just give up. And so there are teams that you basically assume you're going to beat as a fan. And as a Bulls fan, we had two game series against the Knicks and the Magic back-to-back. And I sort of went into those series assuming that we were going to beat both of them both times. And we ended up splitting the series. And in each of the games that we lost, one against the Knicks, one against the Magic, it just sort of felt hopeless. Like, even if we were playing them close, it didn't feel like the effort was there. And it was just like, we're not going to win today. We don't feel like it.
Yeah, and it's tough when you see that. It's tough when you see the Bulls playing really, really well, and then you are visibly seeing them lose effort as the game's going on. And I just don't get it. I really don't. And I don't think that our coach is a bad coach, you know what I mean? I do think sometimes, however, they know who they are. And they know that, and a lot of the times so many other teams in the league have so much more offensive firepower than the Bulls. And I think that could be a little frustrating at times. But if you want to be great in this league, you can't really think about that. You just have to try to be better. You know, you have to try to do whatever it takes to make up for whatever you're lacking. And if you don't have that mindset, then you're not going to get anywhere. And you're just not.
On offense, as I've been saying, Kobe White is the big project this year. It's his second season, and I think the Bulls coaching staff wants to turn him into more of a point guard as opposed to a shooting guard. I don't know if that's necessarily the right call, but he has that offensive effort that we're looking for. He shoots a lot,
yes.
even when he's not hot. He shoots, and I like that. Until it gets, if he's not improving on a shot in a couple years' time, then we'll have some problems. But that effort isn't there defensively, and like you said, if you can't match them on offense, you got to try in defense. And Kobe White doesn't do that. Lauri Markkanen doesn't do that. And Zach LaVine, still probably a below average defender, but I will give him the credit. I do think he's become noticeably better on defense this year.
Yeah, I do think there are definitely some improvements this year, but it's hard being a Bulls fan because I do think that you are right in being optimistic, because the Bulls are probably, at least from a potential perspective, this season have looked better than they have ever. You know, I think that things are looking up, but I think it might be a little fatigue on my end for being so pessimistic. You know?
Yeah, these past few years have been difficult to watch.
Yes, but at times, though, watching the Bulls games, they are pretty fun right now, because they do have some talent, and I am being pessimistic, but sometimes they do play really well, and it's fun to watch. And so I'm not going to just take away that they are doing a lot better, but it is kind of, we watch sports to see our favorite teams win, you know? And if I'm not seeing that, obviously there's going to be a little bit of fatigue there. But especially if I see my team lose close games, you know, it's not as bad sometimes. But when they're just getting blown out and they're showing that they're not even trying, that does get to me a little bit.
Yeah. And to the Bulls' credit, they have a lot of close losses. I mean, they're still losses, but the fact that they play so many teams close is sort of the reason I'm so optimistic. We are 11-15 right now after that win against the Pacers, and we have 2 losses by 1 point on buzzer beater game-winning threes. We have, I don't have the numbers up in front of me right now, but I think we have at least 7 losses by 4 points or fewer. And that's sort of the hallmark of a young team, being able to close out games. So the optimist in me thinks that come the end of the season, the team will have had enough time to sort of learn how to play with each other, specifically the veterans with the young guys, because I still feel like there's a bit of a disconnect there.
Yeah.
But it's just a matter of closing out games. And when you lose by 4 points to the Wizards, 4 points to the Magic, 4 points to the Knicks, sort of all within the span of a week, even though they're losses, I'm still happy with that, because staying in games is good. And
yeah,
unfortunately, the Bulls also have a lot of blowout losses. There are hardly any sort of medium losses in there. It's all by under 4 points or by over 15 points.
And that's tough, because the Bulls definitely gave up in those games. You know?
Yeah, there was the one against the Lakers, one against the Clippers, where, you just sort of never felt like the Bulls had a chance. And that's not, obviously, that means the Bulls aren't a top team.
Yes. Sad to say, but it's the truth. Yeah,
I do think that the Bulls still have a reasonable chance to make the playoffs. I mean, the East is in shambles right now. Even though the Bulls are 11-15, we are a game and a half out of the 6th seed right now.
See, that's the thing though too. The way the Bulls are, I think also just in terms of how the Bulls team is built perspective currently, I mean, it is kind of odd, you know? Like I don't really know exactly what their goal is offensively, how they want to play it outside of give Zach LaVine the ball, you know? Because philosophy-wise, I am a little confused. When I watch their games, I think I don't know really what this offense is trying to accomplish, you know?
Yeah.
And I think they play basketball as if they had better scorers, but they don't. You know how when you can play, like say if you have a team and it has someone like, I'm just going to use LeBron but if you have LeBron and then let's just go back to Kyrie Irving days, right? They can just dribble the ball as much as they want because they can score at any time. And people will have to be nervous, so they might have to double them, pay more attention to them, and then other people will be open, right? But the Bulls, I feel as if sometimes they play that way, but they have just Zach LaVine, and what? Who's their second best offensive player? That's hard to even determine sometimes.
Yeah.
So they play that way, and I'm thinking, you guys got to play more as a team, you know? It just, but I don't even know what's the best route to play because it's hard to determine what everybody's strengths are, I guess. You know what I'm saying?
I sort of do. I do disagree a little bit in terms of sort of I think you're getting at a ball movement type problem. And I'm actually pretty okay and comfortable with the offensive sets for the most part up until the end of the game. I'll get into that in a second. But I think that the way the offense is run, even when Zach LaVine is not on the floor, I think there's a lot of ball movement, and I'm happy to see that. I think Thaddeus Young, Thomas Satoransky, Garrett Temple, they sort of make that veteran core that sort of is leading the Kobe White and Patrick Williams. So I think the offense is well up until the end of a game when we need to win, and the Bulls don't do anything other than a Zach LaVine ISO.
And that's a problem.
I noticed
that's the most important part of the game.
It is. I noticed that at the end of regulation today against the Pacers, it was 105 to 105 and 10 seconds left on the clock, and it's just a LaVine ISO, and he misses a mid-range jump shot. I feel like that has happened at least 5 or 6 times this season alone, and we're only 25 games in. Like, every close game ends with a LaVine ISO, and most of the time this season, he's missed them. I try not to hold that against him, because he's still the guy I would want to be taking those last shots, but I would prefer that the Bulls would draw some actual plays to get him shots, as opposed to walk it up and do whatever you feel like.
It's not his fault also too that the Bulls are always they're always in close game positions where he has to make a play, you know? Like why can't we just have a lead? You know what I mean? And just close out the game. But yeah, we won this game, you know? That's kind of an issue. You know, because like you said, there's so many close games that the Bulls play all the time, and I get it. It's basketball. There's a lot of teams that have close games, but I feel as if it's hard, you know, because Zach LaVine, I feel like at the end of the game has so much responsibility, and I don't think it's fair because they always ask him to close out a game and this and that, which is fine. But it's not like they're asking him to close out a game and, hey, just make sure you keep on scoring where we have a lead, you know. It's no, you need to make sure we're scoring because we're in a position where we're basically tied right now, and it's all on you. So go out there and score. And that's a problem.
It is. And like I said, I think they want Kobe White to sort of be that number 2. So that's why they're letting him shoot so much. So I think a lot of it is on Kobe, actually. Not in the sense of blame, but in the sense of like he's the one that needs to step up before this team can be a team.
He does need to step up. I do think Kobe is still young. I think that there's a chance that Kobe could actually, because I had talked about his aggressiveness. I'm gonna get back into that, I guess. I think there's a chance that Kobe could be really good, but he just has to be more consistent of a shooter. If he gets more consistent as a shooter, then Kobe could be a very good point guard in this league. You know, because I think in terms of his speed, he could drive in and dump the ball outside. You know, he's going to pull some attention. And if he could shoot from the outside, then people really have to pay attention to him. I think with his mix of athleticism, and if he's able to shoot well, I think he could be very, very dangerous. However, if so many people could shoot the three really well, then they'd be really dangerous. So I'm hoping that it works for him.
That's a ways off.
You know what I mean? I'm hoping that but if it does work out for him that way, then he will be, I feel like, a very good player, very effective. But I hope one day, I guess at least my hope is that he can become that player.
We will see.
All right, do you want to talk about this top 15 quarterbacks?
Yeah, sure. Let's do that.
So Jack and I saw this. Well, I saw this tweet and I sent it to Jack. So Jack also saw it. And then this person made a list of top 15 quarterbacks in the league, and it had a decent amount of likes and retweets and all that. So we just wanted to discuss it. I'm gonna read their list, and then we could read ours. And I think for me, at least, I will say in my list, I kind of didn't keep Dak Prescott in my list because he didn't really play this season. So I'm kind of just looking top 15 quarterbacks in mind from the season that was just played. You know, I don't know how you looked at it.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know if you looked at it from point on next season. But for me, I looked at it, okay, well, who are the top 15 quarterbacks of this season, I guess. But in this list, they said there's Mahomes at 1, Rodgers 2, Watson 3, Wilson 4, Allen 5, Dak 6, Lamar 7, Tannehill 8, Brady 9, Cousins 10, Herbert 11, Stafford 12, Kyler 13, Baker 14, and Carr 15.
I think that's a decent
So what
list.
did you think? Yeah?
Yeah, by the way, shout out to that's at Watson LaFlame on Twitter for that tweet.
Oh, yeah. Shout out.
And
Sorry about that.
When I did my rankings, I took a different perspective on it. I was looking at it in terms of who do I want on my team next year for next year alone. I know some people take their quarterback rankings like from a sort of dynasty perspective, so they like would prefer youth. And I tried not to do that. I just thought, who do I want to win me games next season? So I had my top 4 exactly the same. I had Mahomes, Rodgers, Watson, Wilson, because I think those 4 are clearly sort of tier 1 for me. In terms of it's like we were talking about with the Super Bowl. When you get the ball back with a minute left, those are the only 4 quarterbacks that I would trust 100% of the time.
Could I ask you a question real quick?
Go for it.
So when you say for next season, do you mean just next season? Or do you mean the next seasons and thereon, like who you would pick as your franchise quarterback going forward, or just if you're going to win a Super Bowl, go for a Super Bowl push next season, this is your person?
I tried to take a look at it only in the terms of next season. If I need to win a game right now, what quarterbacks do I want?
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure. Let me clarify.
So yeah, I agreed with Watson LaFlame in terms of top 4, Mahomes, Rodgers, Watson, and Russell Wilson.
Okay. You can keep, if you want, you could go through and I'll go, because mine is a little different. And I guess I'll try to make a list on the fly while you're doing this that kind of matches with yours, because I think that is an interesting way to look at it, at least from, I don't know, I think it's interesting. Like if you got to win a game right now, who would you want?
And so I had an easier time sort of tiering my guys as opposed to making a list. I do end up having like a full ordered list, but sort of my next tier of guys was I had Dak Dak Prescott at number 5, Josh Allen at number 6, Lamar Jackson at number 7. And that was sort of my next tier break because I think those are the sort of 3 standout young guys that have earned my trust. Josh Allen specifically is the one that earned my trust a lot this past year. I think he made great improvements, much in the same way Dak Prescott did, actually. And if you were to ask me a year ago to do this, I would have had Lamar Jackson at 5. But after the year he had, I sort of knocked him down a peg.
It is interesting with players like Lamar Jackson, though, because, I feel a lot of people have hard time, and even me, I had a hard time with ranking a player like Lamar Jackson and Kyler Murray, because if you look at their passing numbers, I feel good, but you have to also take into context how many rushing touchdowns they score too, Yeah. Because I think, let me look at the stats really quick, but I think that Kyler Murray scored either 40 or almost 40 touchdowns this season, if you count his rushing touchdowns.
Kyler Murray had 26 passing touchdowns and 11 rushing touchdowns.
So 37. That's a lot.
It's quite a lot, yeah.
Because a lot of these people on this list definitely didn't score 37 touchdowns this season. And like not on on my list, and so like that. At first I had Kyler Murray a lot lower, but then I thought, well, because of his passing. But then I thought, well, but Kyler also does score a lot of touchdowns on the ground. So I kind of definitely have to put that into perspective as well.
Yeah, I had the same issue with ranking Kyler Murray. Spoiler alert, I have him number 11.
What, for real?
Number 11, yep.
I have him number 11 too. Well, I had him number 11, and then I moved him up actually. But initially I had him number 11.
So my next tier after that top 7, I had number 8, and this might shock you, Tom Brady.
Number 8?
I left Tom Brady at 8, not because he won the Super Bowl, but because just his whole season. He won me over, and he is still the Tom Brady that I didn't want to believe that he is.
Yeah, I know, right? It was tough to actually think that he was going to come back and be this good. But somehow, some way, he was that good.
Yep. And then at number 9, I had Matthew Stafford, which we'll get into him in a little bit. Number 10, Ryan Tannehill, and number 11, Kyler Murray.
Number 9, Ryan Tannehill, 11, Kyler Murray.
And Tannehill is a topic of discussion that we have a lot in my fantasy football Discord chat, because some of us think that Ryan Tannehill is a top 10 quarterback, and some of us think he's not even a top 15 quarterback. And to those people who think he's not a top 15 quarterback at this point, I don't know what else he can do, because he's not flashy. He's obviously not Kyler Murray in terms of entertainment, but what he brings to the team built around him, I think he's more than proven to me that he's a top 10 quarterback.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? He threw 33 touchdowns this season, and he threw like 5 picks. I know he has a good running back, but to take that away from him completely kind of seems odd,
Yeah, I think a lot of people still have that anti-Dolphin bias, which is fair because the Dolphins were the Dolphins for so long.
Yeah, it's funny. I guess I could see that.
But when he took over for Mariota in Tennessee, they became good. And like what else can you say?
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I could see where that could change people's opinions, but in my opinion, that shouldn't matter. I mean, if he's good now, he's good now. But I know you could still think, well, he could not be good at any second, because remember when he was that bad then, And so I could see how, because that's how people's brains work, They just think, well, I remember him being bad for a long time, so any time he could be bad. And you know what? Those people saying that, Jack, one day they're going to be right. They're going to be right? And it could be because he just gets old and you know what? He's not good anymore. And they'll be like, see, I told you, he's one day,
That's a very real bias. And as an avid fantasy football player, I recognize that in myself all the time. You brought up Derrick Henry. And in fantasy circles, he's sort of, despite the numbers he's been putting up for the past couple off seasons, he's been branded as a do not draft, like in the first round type guy for many reasons, which I could get into, but that's not really our subject at the time. But for years, I've been thinking to myself, okay, I'm not going to draft Derrick Henry. He's not the kind of guy I want. And every year he keeps putting up these numbers, and every year I ignore them. And I stick to my biases, saying he was bad back then. I thought he was bad a year ago. I still think he's bad now. And I think finally this year I'm gonna avoid that. But because sort of people make a judgment and then evidence shows up that disproves that judgment, but we still stick to our initial judgment. So having Tannehill ranked at 10 is sort of is an effort for me to move away from that bias, because a year ago I was in that anti-Tannehill crowd.
Yeah. I mean, I think people, they generally revert to what they know and what they've seen. And for the longest period of time, you would see Ryan Tannehill as a bad quarterback,
Right.
So that's what your brain's automatically going to go back to. Like, Ryan Tannehill, bad. But he's not bad anymore. He just isn't. If you think he is, you're wrong, I won't say, I think I still have that same problem to an extent, because there are some quarterbacks that I feel like when I'm trying to make my list, like how you said, but in a slightly different way now, that I like more of just a future way, because I still basically in my list too, I had Phillip Rivers and Drew Brees kind of at the bottom, because they did numbers wise play all right, but I mean I wouldn't want them to be my quarterback. I just mean for that season, sometimes they pulled it out, they pulled off some good wins out of nowhere, you know what I mean? So kind of can't ignore that, but I wouldn't want any of them to be my quarterback this season, that's for sure. But but they did on occasion pull some shit out of nowhere. So,
right.
Question though, what do you think of Kirk Cousins?
It's funny you ask, because to close out my top 15, I have Justin Herbert at 12, Kirk Cousins at 13, Derek Carr at 14, and Baker Mayfield at 15.
So you think Kirk Cousins is better than Baker Mayfield?
I would rather have Kirk if I had to win a football game today.
Okay. And now I just want to ask this. Is it because Kirk Cousins is a safer quarterback, makes less mistakes?
Assessing Kirk Cousins is a difficult task, similarly to Tannehill. I think that, yes, Kirk Cousins is a safer quarterback.
Okay, that's what I was thinking too. That's why it's hard to judge Kirk Cousins, because he isn't super flashy, but he is. I think he's an average quarterback. But he's just safe. He doesn't throw a lot of picks. Sometimes he has a good game out of nowhere, or a few good games, but he's kind of just like a slightly above middle of the pack guy, which makes sense if he's because where you put him.
Right. Yeah.
But so I didn't get to. Now I'm redoing my list, but so I didn't finish it. But I'm kind of having a hard time, because now I'm thinking, oh man, what future type of stuff, Because there are a lot of quarterbacks that I really do like. I didn't put Dak Prescott in this just because I don't know about his injury, and I don't know how he's going to be. I think he'll be fine, because I mean he's a pocket passer generally, so he's not having less mobility. If he does have less mobility, won't be a problem. At least I think.
Well, he's not Lamar or Kyler, but I think the mobility is still a factor for him.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely a part of his game, but I think he could be a pocket passer. I think he will need to roll out sometimes, but not as much as some of the other those types of
Agreed,
people,
yeah. His Dak Prescott's passing numbers before the injury this season were literally historic.
Yeah, they were pretty good. Yeah, they that's the thing. They were pretty good, but Cowboys defense not good.
Yeah.
So there you go. But I guess my top three in terms of that were Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson. Now I'm looking at more out of
that's a clear top four.
Yeah, more from a perspective though of future type of thing, not just like next season, but future type of like maybe next 5 years.
You're taking age into account.
Yes, yeah. So I am now maybe next 3 years. I'll say next 3 years. So that's how my list is right now. So actually, next 3 years, I'll put Deshaun above Aaron Rodgers. So Patrick, Deshaun, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson. That's what I'll say. So after that, this is tough, man. This is tough. Josh Allen at 5. And I'm also looking at it from a Bears perspective. I'm saying that because you said for my team, you know, and then I instantly thought, who would I want for the Bears?
Right.
And the Bears need a somewhat mobile quarterback because as of right now, our line isn't terrible, but it's also not the best. So that's also something that I'm considering. So Tom Brady will not really be on my list. Just because I think that Tom Brady would not really play well on the Chicago Bears. That's how I feel. I could be wrong, but I just think Tom Brady can't move, and the Bears sometimes their line's just not there. I do think that they found some good players in Sam Mustipher and Bars, but that's not for sure, you know. So I don't want to get a non-mobile quarterback and then what am I going to do now? You know what I mean? So
yeah.
Next step, I would say Matthew Stafford, Kyler Murray. So Matthew is at 6, Kyler is at 7. Now this is where I'm starting to actually get stuck, essentially. I really like Justin Herbert a lot. That this is more
I do too.
Long game stuff. But I also really like Joe Burrow a lot. I think Joe Burrow, he could be one day a top 5 quarterback. I think that his line was awful. It was actually, I watched a lot of Bengals games because I like Joe Burrow. I like how he plays. And I think he kept them in games. They didn't win, you know, but he kept them in games that they should not have been in. And he was getting attacked. And I'm saying attacked. Like, he was getting attacked the whole game. It's bad. And so I think if he had a really, really good line, his numbers would be astounding. Because he made plays out of nothing. He was getting just destroyed every game. I knew he was going to get hurt. So I think as long as he comes back from injury well, he'll be a top 5 quarterback. I feel maybe top 6, but top 5, top 6 quarterback within the next 2 to 3 years. So this is why I'm having a problem here, because I do like Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow actually more than Baker Mayfield and Derek Carr, at least for a future type of thing. So I'm gonna say right now, Justin Herbert because he has no injury, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson. And it feels weird to me to say that, but Lamar, I think, is afraid to throw the ball sometimes, and I don't like that. Lamar's at 10. And then, I don't know. Now it's getting real tough. Ryan Tannehill, 11. Derek Carr. I would say Kirk Cousins. And now I just at 15, I don't know. I'm having a hard time.
It's tough, yeah.
There's too many. At this point, the quarterbacks are all kind of the same skill level, I feel like. And I'm just gonna put Dak Prescott at 15. Forget, you know what I mean? Hopefully he's healthy. If Dak Prescott becomes healthy though, if he is just the same quarterback, he comes back, he would move up. I would say all the way to 6. So he would take Matthew Stafford's spot.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
So essentially, everyone else will move down, but that's kind of where I'm looking at. So I don't know. I the skill level of quarterbacks is so weird, because when I think about it from everyone in their own positions that they currently are, it's kind of weird to look at it because maybe not a lot of people think Joe Burrow's that good, because if you look at his numbers, not that great. But if you watch the games, you would realize he was getting attacked every single play. So how is he supposed to do well? And so that makes it tough. But then you look at someone, I would say, yeah, even look at someone like Russell Wilson. He had a good season. He was also getting attacked. But Russell Wilson, I feel like he's a veteran quarterback. So he is better at working around this. But even he got to a point where he just couldn't deal with it anymore.
Russell Wilson got absolutely no help this year.
It was bad. And I think there comes a point where you look at these situations and you go, okay, but how good is Russell Wilson really? Because you might look at Tom Brady and say, oh, well, he did better than Russell Wilson this season. But is Tom Brady really a more talented quarterback than Russell Wilson right now? Maybe, maybe not. I think Russell Wilson could fit on more teams than Tom Brady could fit in this stage of his career.
I think that's accurate.
So, yeah, I mean, it's tough. But overall, the list wasn't bad, I feel like, from this guy. But
I think it's notable that neither of us mentioned Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah, I know. I thought about that too.
I think his time is coming to a close.
Yeah, Big Ben. Sad to say, but I think it might be soon to be over. Is he retiring this season, or is that up in the air?
I don't think we have any word on that.
Do you think he should retire this season?
I think he wants to do sort of what Drew Brees did and let the Steelers get a guy before he leaves. And I don't think the Steelers have a guy right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. But it does suck though because he still is a serviceable quarterback. So, in terms of draft,
in some ways, yes. But in other ways, specifically, there was this tweet I saw from an account called QB Data Mine, and I'm not sure what their criteria was, but among 31 eligible quarterbacks, Ben Roethlisberger ranked 30th in depth-adjusted accuracy. And to me, what that says is, and it matches the eye test. I watched a lot of Steelers games this past year. I stopped having trust in Ben to get the ball where it needs to go. I know there's been a lot of narrative about the drops for Pittsburgh receivers, and that is a problem. But independent of those drops, Ben just can't really throw that well anymore. He still throws deep. He just doesn't throw accurately.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I did watch some Steelers games too, and obviously the Steelers, I've never really been a big fan of them, so it's not the games that I watch the most, but he is having some accuracy issues. My main point is that I think what players like Ben Roethlisberger, they kind of know what to do to get you in a position where you could win the game, I guess is my thing, to keep you in it. And I think that will somewhat hurt the Steelers in terms of draft spots, But
yeah, I mean the Steelers started 11-0 this year.
Yeah, but
it's difficult to say that Roethlisberger isn't like a top 15 quarterback with that start, but based on the eye test for me and for you and for a lot of other people, it was like sort of Roethlisberger independent.
Yeah, it is sad to say that you'd rather have Kirk Cousins than Ben Roethlisberger, like be in that world, but I think we're in that world. I mean, it's just weird because I don't really like Kirk Cousins, but is he the worst quarterback? No. If the Bears had Kirk Cousins, I would probably be happier than the current situation.
Well, there's a lot that's better than the current situation.
I would even be happier, though, if the Bears had Ben Roethlisberger. I'm going to be honest. There's a lot of quarterbacks that I'd be happier. If the Bears, instead of having Nick Foles, had Alex Smith, I'd be happier. There's and it sounds bad. I mean, and Alex Smith, he might not even play like half the games. I would still be happier. But Nick Foles has injury trouble too. So what am I even talking about here? But yeah, I mean, I think this is pretty good today. So I'll give another shout out to, what was the guy's Twitter name?
It was at Watson LaFlame.
Yeah, so thank you for the rankings list. I thought it was pretty interesting. I will say, however, I do think Cousins is a little high. But but other than that, I do like the list in general. So yeah. But yeah, thank you everybody for listening. Hopefully we'll get another one out for you sooner this time. And yeah, thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Before we end this, I want to say one more thing. I don't know how long it will take us to get video involved in these, but that's something that me and Jack will discuss eventually. But I think that would be kind of cool. But we're gonna figure that out. So, but thank you. Thanks for listening.